My experience growing up is to avoid failure at all costs. And sometimes even, to the point of burnout because you are almost so afraid of failing that you will do anything to avoid. And that has been a fear I've had to think about head on.
Hi, I'm Jason Ramsden, and I believe we can all work on leading a more positive and intentional life. And this show details my journey by sharing my learning, stories, and conversations with guests. If you want to lead a more intentional life focused on being the best you possible, please subscribe today. Now, let's get into today's episode. Hello, my Positivity Posse, and welcome to another episode of Positivity on Fire. Today, I had the pleasure of reconnecting with Laura Tierney, the founder and CEO of the Social Institute, whose mission is to empower students to navigate social media and technology in a positive, high-character way. Laura's prior experience in the social media realm involved helping build strategies and campaigns for brands including ESPN, Samsung, Coca-Cola, Travelocity, Oakley, and Disney. Along with her passion for competition, this led Laura's company to create a unique, gamified social media curriculum which has been featured on NPR and by the Washington Post and USA Today. We cover a lot of ground in today's show, so let's get started with my friend and today's guest, Laura Tierney. Laura, good to see you. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Positivity on Fire.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back and talking with you.
It's been a while, probably been a year or two since we've actually interacted directly.
That's right. But your influence on our work, I feel like, is still felt in the day-to-day. So it's been a while, but also doesn't feel like it.
People may not know who you are, so I want you to introduce yourself. And I also want to share what your life motto is.
I'm Laura Tierney, founder and CEO of the Social Institute. And my life motto is to control the controllable, knowing that there's not a lot of things that we can control, but there are many things that we can stay in control of, like our attitude and our interests and our goals and our priorities. And that has really helped me along the way.
Control the controllable. What are you controlling right now?
I am controlling my outlook on a busy Monday afternoon where there's a lot going on. And I think it's easy to sometimes feel overwhelmed by the times that we're going through, these unique, times that we're navigating. But I also think that for every challenging meeting or challenging conversation, you're one step closer to something positive happening. So I think I'm controlling my attitude and outlook these days. The phrase I use with our team is CTC. So control the controllable. And that's all you could do at the end of the day.
Love it. And so people don't know you're the founder and CEO of the Social Institute. I know you did that pre-kids. So you've got Grant and then you got another one on the way in a couple of months. So you got a lot of control the controllable going on, running a pretty amazing company. I know the mission of the Social Institute is to fuel students' health, happiness, and future success. Now, that's not a positive mission. I don't know what is a positive mission. How did it all come to be? Tell everybody how it all came to be, Laura.
Well, the Social Institute is definitely a labor of love and taking risks and kind of pursuing what fulfills me, at the end of the day. And so I started the Social Institute in 2016. And I'm so thankful because I got paired up with you and your colleagues at Ravenscroft to think about this mission of helping students and the 5 inches between their ears and making positive choices, especially online. And that started out as great. I'm going to be helping this one school, and maybe a few others. And over the years, always go with your gut and make certain decisions. And 5 years later, we're helping 150 schools across the country, tens of thousands of students, and has taken off in a way I never, ever dreamt it would. When you and I and others were reviewing surveys and content together and just getting scrappy about it, but putting in, the work. I'm really grateful for the the chance I have now to help students, to build a team, but it definitely comes with taking risks too at the same time.
What do you think that has been the biggest risk in the last 5 years?
Oh man, my experience growing up is to avoid failure at all costs. And sometimes even, to the point of burnout because you are almost so afraid of failing that you will do anything to avoid. And that has been a fear I've had to think about head on, as we're a small business entering the pandemic, as we grew the team, had to make other decisions, about growing the team or not growing the team. And just that constant, that fear is in the back of your mind. And so I think that is one of the biggest risks I've had to take, is just accepting that. And, even if you fail, you gave it your best shot. There's certainly other day-to-day risks, that come with leading a team or leading an organization. The risk of agreeing to something that might not be the best for you or the organization. The risk of hiring someone that might not be a great fit for the culture. But I think if you constantly think of like, well, what if, in a negative way, you'll drive yourself nuts, because there's so many what ifs that could happen from a negative standpoint. And so for me, the thing I keep in the back of my head is like, well, if we make this decision and go this direction, we can always pivot, no matter what happens. And that has helped me just think of, navigate the last 5 years and starting a company while, having 2 kids and juggling everything that comes with it.
When you talk about the fear of failure, and I've done other episodes around that here on Positivity on Fire, I want to know what that means to you, especially as it relates to control the controllable.
Yeah. I think for me, because what I'm doing is so mission oriented, that fear of failure could mean letting that mission down, in our sense, like letting the students down at the schools that we serve, at the schools that we want to serve, which is an immense weight to put on your shoulders. And for me, that acts as a driver, but it also acts as extra stress and pressure when you make it so lofty like that. And when you step back, think, okay, the kids are going to be all right, even if you do fail with this company, if we can stay positive about what we're doing. And I think that only just fuels your success. I'm curious, what are some of the themes that you all saw in previous podcasts around fear of failure?
I think for me, I was telling my own story about being afraid even to leap into doing a podcast and starting a company. Everybody has fears, right? Everybody has fears of failing for whatever reason it may be. It may be how you were brought up. It may be you don't want to look poorly in the eyes of your peers. You don't want to let a spouse or a partner down. And sometimes you just don't know enough about how to launch something to even try. But, I know the work that you do, and then also the work that lots of educators do today, is talking about how it's okay to fail, because we learn from failure. And so, when we talk about not fearing failing or not fearing failure, it's a way to grow personally and professionally, depending on where you're choosing to fail. For me, failure is an option. You talked about a failure not being an option, but it is an option because it's the only way you're going to grow and learn. So I'm curious, all entrepreneurs fail at some point or have a failing. What's that been for you? What's been your biggest failing?
There's small scale and large scale. I think failures, and when I look back on work with the Social Institute, the small, one small failure, I remember going into a meeting with a partner school and I had the wrong logo up on the screen. I literally had a different school reference with this meeting. I remember walking out of there just being like, oh my goodness, just the conversation that goes through your head after mistakes like that. You feel like a failure. In moments like that, you just feel silly. And then there's other more large scale failures where you might bring someone on to your team And in retrospect, they might not be a good fit. And you made that decision and you're trying to nurture them and grow with them. And also you have to look at their strengths and how it, fits the organization and if that's good for the long term. And if it's not, you could feel like a failure as a leader for making that initial decision. But I think it kind of like back to what you said, though, for me, failure has always acted like a fuel to the fire. But at the same time, you can't take it so seriously to the point that you're not okay at all with failing and you're focused solely on perfectionism. Because I find that you innovate a lot slower when you're just focused on being perfect. And I think there's this great principle with startups and this great book called The Lean Startup. And it talks about how the most innovative entrepreneurs can go through this circle of innovation. And the faster you go through this circle, the more that you innovate. And part of that circle is failing and getting feedback and implementing that feedback. And so if you can measure and if you get kind of negative feedback from measuring, I see that, again, it's like only taking one step forward because you have now more input. You're a better leader for it. You're a better innovator for it.
If you look back on this past year, what's been a defining moment? We've talked a little bit about fear of failure and kind of the things that maybe you've learned from that along the way. But in this past year, especially through COVID, what's been a defining moment for you? Mm-hmm. And it can be personal or professional.
When COVID initially hit schools and schools began to really lock down what they were doing with the students, they locked down on budgets. As a small business, that was a scary time because you didn't know. It was just kind of also like fear of the unknown. You didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember our team getting together and we started just talking with schools. And I think that's one thing we've done really well over the past 12 months is we don't assume we know what, our audience wants. We want to go out and talk to them and see what makes them tick and what their needs are. And so that's what we did. Back to controlling the controllable. Like you could just control that inspiration and that input. And then out of those conversations, we ended up launching a whole new product called Win at Social Live. And it's lessons about current events and things going on in society. And that ended up taking off in, a few months later. And the whole team felt like just rallied behind it. It felt like someone just giving you a ton of energy during that time when many people didn't have energy at the beginning of the pandemic, because we felt like we were in control of something. We were in control of how we responded to this sort of unknown time and not knowing how schools were going to react to COVID. So professionally, that stands out to me as a defining moment where you make something out of what you think might be nothing. And then personally, our family has started having family meetings, even with our little 4.5-year-old son, just talking about what each of us needs to get through the week or to get through the day. And that open communication has come out of the pandemic where we didn't do that beforehand. But now my husband knows he can always come to me and just say, hey, here's what I need to get through this week. And it's going to be a stressful week. Things go a lot more smoothly when you're able to communicate what you personally need, to get through a certain time.
Shocker that open and transparent communication is actually something that's a good thing, right?
That's right. That's right. And even our, little Grant man has gotten in on it as a 4.5-year-old telling us what he needs, even though sometimes a third of his answer, usually just chocolate. I need chocolate or something else. Right.
He's only forecasting what we all know is, we need chocolate sometimes to get through a day, right? When it's tough. So
exactly.
Well beyond his years.
The students, the kids know more than we think. We can take a lot of pointers from them as adults.
That is true. That is true. talked about control the controllable. You talked about fear of failure and kind of learning from that. And you talked about things you've learned from the pandemic here in terms of opening up family meetings and conversation. Through all of that, what's something that you've learned about yourself, Laura?
I've learned that you can always be learning, that you can always like surround yourself with people who have been there or done that before, and you can always take notes from them. And I think of, my interactions in our work together. Like I think back to the time like 3 years ago where I thought I had a great sense of where I wanted to go with the Social Institute. And I remember sitting down and watching one of your presentations at the Atlas conference, I believe it was, and you presented about the intersection of how schools are making decisions based on data. And that for me was like mind blowing. And we ended up incorporating that into just thinking about how do we approach our work, that ranging to, sitting down with my colleagues, my teammates who have sometimes different personalities, than I do. They might be more introverted or more extroverted, right? And then, but learning not only how to interact with them, but how that is such a strength and, what they bring to the team. And so I think for me, it's just, you're always learning. Like definitely never know everything. And if you can have that mindset of, being humble and vulnerable and have your ears open for different people that come in and into your life, I think you could just be a sponge. And so for me, the pandemic has actually allowed me to use like LinkedIn and Zoom and other tools to connect with so many different people who have all these great strengths where I could just learn a lot from them. And sometimes that stems from like reaching out on LinkedIn and saying, hey, I came across your profile. I was reading an article on this website about your team's work and would just love to hear more about it. There are silver linings. And that would be one silver lining I definitely look to from the last 12 months.
And I know you love acronyms, right? CTC.
Yes.
So ABL, always be learning, always can learn something new. How do you apply that in your daily work?
Well, especially at the Social Institute, we love learning from students. And so I make sure nearly every week we have meetings with students where we could ask them questions about what they're experiencing. Like, what does your day-to-day routine look like? What are your concerns about starting school this fall? And I find that taking a seat, coming to those calls, knowing that you don't know everything about the students. In fact, often far from it, of what they're going through. And if you can sit there and truly actively listen to what they're going through and hear them out and take those insights and apply it, to our work, it puts us in a position of constantly learning, because what students are navigating is always changing, from year to year and online and offline. And that's definitely one of the things I love about this industry and this organization, is that technology is changing so quickly. And then when you combine that with how a student's life is developmentally changing so quickly, you're in a position to just have nonstop learning every single week.
I know you survey kids all the time, around their social media habits. And you also have student ambassadors who tend to be college kids who are kind of giving back to your program through internships and that sort of thing. You've learned a lot about kids. If you had to give advice to parents, because my listeners are parents and have kids, like what's one piece of advice that you would give to parents today about kids?
I'm going to speak for the students on this one, because we actually have, this is a great question. It's a question we ask students to share. What advice would you also give to parents? And the most popular response that the students share is that how social media and technology, it's not all negative, and it could be used positively if we choose to see the positives, and how it's not going away anytime soon. And so the more that we can empower and equip instead of scare and restrict, you end up helping a child, set a child up for success no matter what they have to navigate, rather than restricting them from this world that is not going away. And so it's taking, I think, your same foundation, to your work of positivity and applying it to the world of social media and technology with students.
Do parents whose kids not, work with the Social Institute have ability to get stuff at your site to power and equip themselves to work better with their kids?
Definitely. We have resources for parents, free resources where ranging from family tech contracts that can help your entire family, not just the child or children, but your entire family navigate social media and technology. Like nearly everything we do, we built it with students. We built it with students at Ravenscroft, and we have optimized, enhanced it over the years with input from other students across the country. Parents are able to go in and get the rundown on different insights about students, the most popular apps that students are using across middle school, across high school, and beyond. And so we're hoping to be that friend in your corner that's not getting you ahead of your children, but we're keeping you pretty close to where your child is when it comes to navigating social media and technology. And so parents could head over to thesocialinstitute.com, and there's a resources tab on our website that lists a lot of these great resources and downloads and reports and more.
That's great. Thank you. I know my listeners are certainly going to enjoy those resources. It's kind of like that old commercial that used to say, the more you know, right? The more parents can equip themselves with knowledge about kids and social media. I think that's important. What's the biggest motivator in your life?
I see so many headlines these days about what students are navigating from a social emotional perspective, their well-being. I see media that tends to often cover a negative angle on a lot of topics. And for me, the motivator is giving students some sort of inspiration and positivity. And if I could craft something that even for 15 minutes of their day helps them reframe how they might think about their well-being this fall. We just launched a lesson about thinking, reflecting on what you need to succeed this fall as a student. Even giving them that 15, 20 minutes to just smile and connect with their peers. We know connection is more important than ever now during the pandemic. That's a huge motivator for me because it feels like oftentimes you're swimming upstream, especially when it comes to negativity. There's so much of it to go around in the world, especially when you think about social media and just media in general. And so it's kind of motivating to swim upstream or go against the grain, whatever you want to call it, and put more of that positive energy into the world, and to do it in just a really relevant, relatable, engaging way for students, which is the trickiest part. But it's an awesome challenge.
And an important challenge too. I was reading the news today, actually, where a study had come out to say that the kids who are entering college now, the freshmen, are the most depressed and most anxious kids ever to enter college. And the types of things that are motivating you right now are things that should be motivating college educators and parents to find resources to be able to better help kids through. It's going to be a trying time for them, right? They're coming out of a year and a half of being virtual, more or less, and then having to go off to college, which may most likely be in person at the moment. And so to equip them to do that, I think is a great challenge, and I appreciate that you're trying to tackle it.
To build on that, I read a statistic early on in this work about how we care so much, certainly at schools, about students' academic success. But in order to, one big contributor to a student's academic success, of course, is their social emotional well-being, and how that fuels a child's ability to be able to balance schoolwork and focus on their priorities and more. And so I think there is a wave coming, a wave of social emotional education and focus on well-being and self-care. And that's going to come, I think, across K-12 schools, across colleges and universities, across companies, and companies thinking about how they prioritize their employees' well-being. And so it's again, something coming out of this pandemic is that that focus on supporting the whole person and not just a part of them.
So important. So important. I appreciate that a lot because I think it's going to be critical for kids' success in the future. The whole social emotional learning package, if you will, right? It's not just academics. It's kids, how they interact with others and how they kind of go through life. So well done on that.
Well, and I was going to say, well done. Kudos to you all, because I feel like you and your time at Ravenscroft and the team at Ravenscroft, like you all saw into the future, I think, so much about how this focus on social media and technology wasn't going away. I mean, you're of course, like your background with technology, and then you intersect that with, people's mindset. Like, that's a really powerful thing, technology and mindset and attitude. And so a lot of this was just, trying to keep up with the vision that you all laid out, years ago, and in helping me get this off the ground and starting this work together. But it's exciting to think about schools are prioritizing this more and more and more. And it's definitely not going away.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to kind of get started with you and watch you grow, watch the company grow, to watch it pivot throughout the pandemic, to add the social emotional learning component, to add a board of advisors who are all about kids and kids' health. And, I only see great things for you in the future as you continue to grow the company. Now, before I let you go, I always have 2 questions that I asked of my guests to close out an episode. What's something that most people don't know about you? Which is tough when you're a public person, right?
Most people don't know that I leave my phone charging in the kitchen overnight. And I love technology. I love social media, but I also want to practice what I preach. And I cannot get sleep when I have the phone next to my bedside table. I just cannot. I'm so tempted to pick it up and check things. So for me, it's totally out of sight, out of mind.
And then the final question is, it's going to be a fill in the blank question. So happiness is
being really self-aware of what does and doesn't make you tick, because I think that awareness can be in many ways your North Star for a lot of the decisions you make and how you frame different challenges that you come across. It's something that I'm constantly working on and struggling with and working on. And for those reasons, you never maybe have full self-awareness, but you can get closer and closer, each project you take on, each team you work with, and, each week that passes. So I think that the self-awareness is the key to happiness.
I appreciate you being with us today, Laura. It's been a great conversation. Where can people find you online and the work that you do?
Well, you better believe I am on most social media platforms. So you can always, connect on LinkedIn or on Twitter, Laura Tierney, but you can also reach out to our organization if there's any way that we could ever be helpful to you or other parents or children. And that's thesocialinstitute.com. Yeah. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Laura. Here are my 3 takeaways from my conversation with Laura today. The fear of failure should be a motivator, not something that paralyzes you in your work. The social emotional health of students and young adults coming out of the pandemic should be of utmost importance for educators. And finally, in life, we should focus more on those things that we can control rather than those we cannot. Control the controllable is a strong life motto. If you liked today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen. And please share this episode, as word of mouth is the only way this show's message grows. And finally, as I close every show, thank you for being here today, my friends. Your gift of time listening to the show means the world to me. And as always, be well, be happy, be you. And until next time, may your quest for positivity begin today.
And how you frame different challenges that you come across. It's something that I'm constantly working on and struggling with and working on. And for those reasons, like you never maybe have full self-awareness, but you can get closer and closer.
For more on my positivity quest, follow me at _JAY Ramsden on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. If you liked today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast app or visit podchaser.com and search for Positivity on Fire. Positivity on Fire is a production of Impact One Media, LLC. All rights reserved.